She was known as the Angel of Mercy, but Nurse Clara Jenkins was conducting a terrifying experiment on her elderly patients, collecting trophies from their final moments. Her horrified sister, Evelyn Jenkins, was the first to suspect the truth, but no one would believe her. It fell to a tenacious detective, Miles Miller, to unravel a pattern of death hidden in plain sight, exposing a killer whose cold clinical curiosity knew no bounds and whose final, shocking act was to turn her evil science upon herself. Oakcrest Retirement Home was known for its quiet hallways and peaceful atmosphere, a place where time seemed to slow to a gentle crawl. For years, the night shift was overseen by Clara Jenkins, a nurse whose unwavering calm and genuine smile made her a favorite among both residents and staff. She moved through the dimly lit corridors with a quiet efficiency, her footsteps barely making a sound on the polished linoleum floors. To the families who entrusted their elderly parents to her care, Clara was a godsend, a patient, kind-hearted woman who seemed to possess boundless compassion. She would often stay past her shift to hold the hand of a lonely resident, or to read aloud to those who struggled with their sight. Her reputation was spotless, her dedication unquestionable, yet a strange and unsettling pattern began to weave itself into the fabric of the night shift. It started subtly, with the passing of Mr. Henderson, a frail but cheerful man whose heart was said to have simply given out. Then it was Mrs. Gable who, despite a recent clean bill of health, was found cold in her bed one morning. The deaths were always peaceful, always occurring in the deep silence between 2 and 4 a.m., and they were always discovered by Clara herself. She would document the time, offer a sad, sympathetic shake of her head to the arriving day staff, and express her condolences to the grieving families with a grace that seemed superhuman. The official causes of death were never suspicious: congestive heart failure, respiratory arrest, sudden decline. The doctor, making his morning rounds, would sign the certificates without a second thought. Why would he doubt the word of his most reliable nurse? The frequency, however, was becoming impossible to ignore. A new death seemed to occur almost every week, but only on the nights Clara worked. The other nurses began to whisper in the break room, a superstitious dread settling over them. They called it the Jenkins curse in hushed tones, a dark joke that nobody truly found funny.
Yet any flicker of suspicion was immediately extinguished by Clara's behavior.
She was the first to organize a card collection for the family, the first to shed a tear at the loss of a dear friend. She embodied grief so perfectly that to accuse her felt not only professionally reckless but morally wrong. She had expertly crafted her persona as an angel of mercy, a facade so convincing that it blinded everyone to the terrifying truth that was unfolding right before their eyes. The very kindness that defined her was the perfect weapon, allowing her to operate in plain sight, her actions masked by a reputation built on trust and compassion. The first person to see a glimpse of the real Clara Jenkins was the one person who should have known her best, her younger sister, Evelyn. They shared a small, unassuming house on the outskirts of town, an inheritance from their deceased parents. To the outside world, Clara was a devoted sister and a dedicated nurse. But living with her, Evelyn began to notice small off-putting details that didn't align with the saintly image. Clara's routine was rigid, almost ritualistic. She would return from her night shift not with the exhaustion one might expect, but with a strange, quiet energy. She would go straight to her room, bypassing any conversation, and Evelyn would hear the distinct click of a lock turning. The source of this secrecy was a simple wooden box, about the size of a shoebox that sat on Clara's dresser. It was always locked. One afternoon, while Clara was out grocery shopping, Evelyn's curiosity got the better of her. Using a hairpin, she managed to jimmy the cheap lock. Inside, she didn't find diaries or letters. Instead, she found a collection of mundane objects, neatly arranged on a bed of velvet. A pair of gold-rimmed reading glasses, a silver locket with a faded photo inside, a hand-knitted coaster, a single iridescent button. To anyone else, it would have looked like a box of forgotten junk, but Evelyn's blood ran cold. She recognized the locket immediately. It had belonged to Mrs. Gable, a resident at Oakcrest who had passed just last week. Clara had comforted the family and even helped them pack up her room. The reading glasses were Mr. Henderson's. Evelyn had seen them on his face when she'd visited the home with Clara months ago. Each item was a trophy, a souvenir taken from the dead. This wasn't a collection of mementos from friends. It was a serial killer's grisly archive, Terrified, Evelyn confronted her sister that evening. Clara's reaction was not one of anger or shame, but of cold dismissal. She calmly took the box, relocked it, and stated that Evelyn was being hysterical and overly sentimental. She explained each item away as a gift from a grateful family, a story so flimsy it was insulting. But the look in Clara's eyes, a flat, emotionless void where sisterly warmth should have been, told Evelyn the terrifying truth. Her sister, the town's angel of mercy, was a monster. Driven by fear and a desperate sense of duty, Evelyn went to the police, her voice shaking as she presented her unbelievable story. The police station was a world of harsh fluorescent lights and weary skepticism. When Evelyn Jenkins arrived, her story tumbling out in a nervous rush, the officers on duty listened with polite indifference. A grieving sister? A box of trinkets? It sounded like a family dispute, not a matter for law enforcement. They took her statement as a formality, filing it away with little intention of following up. The respected Nurse Jenkins was a pillar of the community. These were the ravings of a seemingly unstable relative. The report likely would have been forgotten entirely if it hadn't landed on the desk of Detective Miles Miller, a man known for his dogged persistence and a deep distrust of easy answers. Miller was a veteran who believed patterns were never a coincidence. Intrigued by Evelyn's claims, he decided to conduct a quiet, unofficial review of the Oakcrest retirement home records. He expected to spend an hour and find nothing. Instead, he found a statistical anomaly that made his blood run cold. The death rate at Oakcrest was, on paper, within normal parameters. But when Miller filtered the data to show only the night shift, specifically the hours between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., a horrifying spike emerged. The probability of so many deaths occurring exclusively during one nurse's shift was astronomically low. It was a pattern of death, meticulously scheduled. His investigation moved from the database to the physical world. He obtained Clara's work logs and found a chilling consistency. Each time a death was recorded, Clara had noted administering a soothing sleep aid, a concoction she prepared herself, claiming it was a special herbal blend to help the residents rest. It was this detail that gave Miller the grounds for a warrant. The search of Clara's locker at Oakcrest revealed nothing out of the ordinary, just a nurse's neat uniform and comfortable shoes. But Miller's team extended the search to her car, parked in the employee lot. There, hidden in the compartment for the spare tire, was a small unmarked leather kit. Inside were several vials of a clear liquid, a set of syringes, and a stack of neatly labeled vials of a common saline solution. The clear liquid was later identified as a powerful, fast-acting paralytic agent, untraceable in the bloodstream after a few hours. Clara wasn't helping them rest. She was conducting their final moments with clinical precision. The arrest was made at the start of her next shift. She offered no resistance, her face a placid mask as they led her away from the place where she had reigned as an angel of death for years. The discovery of the murder kit in Clara's car was a solid prosecutable fact. It was concrete evidence of premeditation, enough to put her away for life. But for Detective Miller, it felt like a first chapter, not the conclusion. The vials suggested a scale of operation that went far beyond a few opportunistic killings. He needed to understand the full scope of her pathology. He secured a more comprehensive search warrant for the sister's home, focusing on Clara's personal space. The initial sweep of her bedroom yielded little. It was as neat and impersonal as a hotel room. It was Miller himself who noticed something off about the basement. The basement was unfinished, a damp space used for storage. One wall, however, seemed newer than the others. The concrete blocks were a slightly different shade and the mortar looked fresher. Behind a stack of old boxes, they found it wasn't a wall at all, but a poorly constructed facade. Forcing it open revealed a small hidden closet. Clara's true sanctum. The air inside was still and cold. The walls were not bare concrete. They were a macabre collage. Dozens of photographs of elderly residents were pinned up, each with a date scribbled beneath it. The date of their death. Neatly arranged on shelves below were the trophies Evelyn had described. But now each item was labeled with a name and a number. The most chilling discovery, however, was a set of leather-bound journals lined up on a single shelf. They were not diaries of emotion, but logs of experimentation. Each entry was a cold clinical report. Subject the Murger 17, male 84, administered 5 milliliters at 02.15, Respiratory arrest noted at 02:47. Minimal physical response. Took 32 minutes, inefficient. Subject number 23. Female, 79, administered 70 long at 02:30. Observed, brief facial muscle twitching at 2:41. Full cardiac arrest at 02:52, more promising. She wasn't killing out of a twisted sense of mercy or for thrill. She was a researcher, and the retirement home was her laboratory. The residents were her test subjects. She was methodically refining her technique, studying dosages and documenting physiological responses to perfect the act of killing. The count in the journals exceeded 50 victims, spanning years and implicating 2 other retirement homes in previous towns where she had worked. The Angel of Death was, in truth, a meticulous and soulless scientist, whose life's work was the study of death itself. Clara Jenkins' trial was a spectacle that gripped the nation, but the defendant herself was its most unnerving feature. She sat through the proceedings with the detached interest of an academic attending a lecture, occasionally jotting down notes as the prosecution detailed her monstrous crimes. She showed no flicker of emotion as grieving family members described their loss, no reaction when her own sister, Evelyn, gave tearful testimony about the box of trophies. Her defense attorney argued fervently for an insanity plea, but a battery of court-appointed psychiatrists delivered a unanimous and chilling diagnosis. Clara Jenkins was perfectly sane. She understood the difference between right and wrong, the legal and the illegal. She simply did not care. The concept of morality was, to her, an irrelevant variable in her experiment. The jury found her guilty on all 52 counts of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The world believed the story was over. Justice had been served. The monster was locked away. But Clara Jenkins had one final shocking data point to record. A guard making his evening rounds found her lying peacefully on the cot in her cell. She was dead. There were no signs of struggle or distress. On her small bare table sat a single empty glass vial, identical to the ones found in her murder kit. How she had smuggled it past security was a mystery that would never be solved. In her hand was a final journal entry, written in her precise looping script. It was not a confession or an apology. It was a clinical case report. The subject was Clara Jenkins. The objective was to document the subjective experience of a self-administered lethal dose. Her final hypothesis, written moments before she consumed the poison, was a line that would haunt the investigators forever. Anticipated physiological response, systemic shutdown. Anticipated psychological response, clarity. Final conclusion, the moment of termination will be tranquil. She had always been the most fascinating subject in her own horrific study, and with cold, calculated finality, she concluded her life's work by turning her experiment on herself.